Firstly, what I'd like to do is bring up our guests from Inglis, and we've got Matt Scown and Simon Vivien from Inglis. So guys, if you would mind coming up and taking a seat, and welcome. And from Magic Millions, I'd like to introduce Tim Brown and Clint Donovan, who's made the trip all the way from Queensland. I think, Clint, is that right? Take a seat, guys. We're all a bit crammed in here, but... So, when introducing the guys and getting the guys to come along, now, how close are they going to get here? What's the rivalry like between Inglis and Magic Millions? Mix it up a little bit. So, guys, the idea behind getting out, the guys from the auction houses out here is to get an idea of what our fillies and mares value is, of course, but also talk about what sort of mares make a sale, and what the auction houses look for, I suppose, with fillies and mares. So, is it their pedigree, is it their racetrack performance, obviously stakes winners, those type of things. But we'll go through that in a little bit more detail. But what I might do first is maybe hand over to Simon, and he can tell us a little bit about Inglis and tell us a little bit about the business and how it operates, and a little bit more about, I guess, your mare sale, which is generally the Great Southern Sale, I believe, Simon. So, yep, and I'll hand over to him and he can tell you a little bit about Inglis, and Matt can add anything that he needs to as well, and then we'll hand over to Clint and Tim. Over to you, Simon.
Thanks, Leigh. Firstly, it's great for Inglis to be involved here. I'm sure I speak on behalf of the boys from Magic Millions as well, that it's great for us to be involved in an evening such as this. Look, certainly one of the most important aspects of our jobs is the aspect involving breeding. That's our primary source of our income. It comes about via yearling sales, selling of all of the yearlings and selling of such stock as broodmares. Now, obviously, to get high quality yearlings, we actually need high quality broodmares going to stud as well. We have a plethora of outstanding stallions. The one thing that we actually always are fighting for, and all of the studs around the country are fighting for, is as many high quality brood mares as they can access for their stallions. So one of the things that the two sales companies do, we basically focus on the auction system. So we're involved with public auctions. We from an Inglis viewpoint, we have a chairman's sale in Sydney in May. We have a very big Australian wheeling and broodmare sale in May as well. And then we have a very big sale here in Victoria, the Great Southern Sale, at the end of June. And I'll leave the boys to talk about the Magic Millions sales that take place in May a little later. We obviously work very hard to try and get as many brood mares as we possibly can into our sales, and mares of the highest quality. So what it is that any brood mare that comes off the racetrack, we certainly found in the past, and a little later you'll hear from Mick and Trent and Natalie, who'll talk about how much easier it is for them to go and buy and sell and syndicate race or young yearlings when they're out of high quality race mares. So trying to access those high quality brood mares, high quality race fillies is very, very difficult. And the two sales companies are very much in competition to try and find that. So one of the major charters of Inglis's annual year is trying to find as many high quality brood mares and race fillies as we possibly can, see them going to stud to the very best stallions in the country, and ultimately providing us with the best yearlings, the best pedigreed yearlings that we can offer at our primary yearling sales. So I think that's probably a fairly brief summary, but that's part of the way that Inglis do it. Matt, anything to add to that, or we'll hand the bat straight over to Clint?
Yeah. Me. What Simon said, basically, folks. First and foremost, congratulations. You've raced, we're talking about 3 individual black type winners here this evening, so well done, and I hope it's been a hell of a lot of fun. And looking through some of the sales results, you've had a great time. And I guess, to reiterate what Simon said, we do go out there and compete for these nice mares and race fillies off the track in order to achieve you guys a premium price for them. Similarly, we have a sale, only the one sale we concentrate on the Gold Coast, late May. We have a standalone race fillies day, followed by 3.5 days of brood mares. Before that's a weanling sale that runs for 2 to 3 days, and then a yearling sale as well, which the Magic Millions call our national sale. So just the one sale focus versus the two, but very much the same business model, if you like.
Thanks, guys. So clearly, we've got some, some bloodstock that has some value. So I guess start with you, Clint. in your opinion and advice to the owners, and there is a few horses here that we're dealing with, but not specifically, what advice would you be giving the roller dice owners in terms of how to when to sell the horse, and when is the right time in your opinion?
I guess what you've really got to do is listen to your trainer. They're going to know how much meat's left on the bone. It's not always the best thing to take all the meat off the bone either. Sometimes, we might elaborate on this a little bit further throughout a few questions, but there are quite often race fillies sold with still racing potential. It's a discussion that probably should be had with the syndicate managers, and first and foremost, the trainers of the race fillies and mares. I guess there is a premium time. Usually it's between, 4 to 5. You don't want to leave it too much later than that, in our opinion. They seem to devalue as you race on, but if there's a good carrot out there and you can win a $500,000 race, why not do that? Why not have the fun? You didn't get in it to sell race fillies at a breeding stock sale. You got into race horses. So I guess it's a fine line. It's a balancing thing. But I'd lean on your trainer and you guys as syndicate managers and owners to make the right call just when that premium time is.
Right. Perfect. Sorry, Leigh, the questions is not quite appropriate now. Please say, but what makes a good brood mare? I mean, we've had.
Yeah, we'll get onto that, Tone. But yeah, absolutely. We'll do some questions afterwards. But very good point. I'm going to hand over to Tim. Tim, tell us a little bit about what's the most important part about having a valuable broodmare. Is it the conformation? Are we talking pedigree? Are we talking racetrack success? What in your opinion, would be, of those sort of criteria? What are you guys looking for the most?
Definitely, racetrack performance is necessary because you're not going to be in this position trying to sell something that hasn't won a race. Secondly, I would think that we look for a good-looking filly or mare, good head, good conformation. Everybody likes it. It comes out of the stall, and the prospective stud farms or owners who are interested in it are just wowed by it. Race performance has to be there, as we've said. The looks have got to be there, and the pedigree certainly helps. Your three that we have on the list tonight there have been bought very well. They've raced extremely well, and they've probably outraced their pedigrees. So when they go to stud, they've got to compete, but their race record is better than other bred fillies. And if they're good-looking fillies, they're going to get a premium.
Matt, I asked you the same question.
What was that?
Your opinion, what do you like?
So my opinion, confirmation comes into it a lot. Obviously, it's very easy to find out a horse's conformation because information's so accessible. You simply need to find out what sort of it costs as a yearling or a weanling, and it sort of gives you a rough idea and sort of the price and what it looks like. And then obviously you've got to inspect it yourself. For me, the female pedigree is a huge part to play in it. You want to buy, when it comes to mares, I believe that you want to buy something with a progressive family, not just thrown geldings that the family sort of becomes dead. You want to buy with fillies in there to keep improving the pedigree along the way. Sire has a massive part to play with it. Obviously, there's some sensational broodmare sires out there, and that would be one of the factors that I'd like to tick off as well, being a good broodmare sire.
So many things to consider, isn't there? And so many moving parts. And I guess, your guys' opinions, you're experts in your field, but of course, there's a lot of agents out there that have their own opinions and their own thoughts on what's important to them. So it doesn't always necessarily equate to getting the price that you're hoping to get. Simon, just want to talk to you a little bit about when you're selling your mare, selling them categorised as a broodmare or as a racing proposition. Can you maybe walk us through a little bit about the opportunity that do some breeders buy to race as well as breed at the same time, or is it more centred with the major sales around buy to breed?
Leigh, it's a little bit along what Clint was saying. It's talking about the opportune time to be able to sell. If you've got yourself a 2 or a 3-year-old filly that you choose to sell in the racing session, and in the opinion of the trainer of the filly, that there's more upside with her being able to continue racing, you'd certainly keep going. You'd race on, and certainly as a 3 or a 4-year-old. I agree with what Clint said. You're trying to find the optimum time to send a mare to stud, and that's generally either as a 4-year-old or as a 5-year-old, and maybe if you want to race through her 5-year-old days, go to stud as an early 6-year-old. But generally, I think that it comes down to how much racetrack potential there is. Clint made the comment of meat on the bone. If you've got a filly or a mare that's basically done everything that she can possibly achieve, well, you might as well go to stud and start getting the values of becoming a producer. If there's more races to be won, look, we often say things like race fillies are race fillies for only a short period of time, and they're brood mares for a long time. And probably one of the great examples clearly is Winx, where you've got a champion race mare who raced on a lot longer than would normally occur, but she also managed to win several $1 million by continuing her racing career. So from my viewpoint, it more comes down to the age. I mean, if something is a 5-year-old, I'd be probably disinclined to be trying to market her as a racing and a breeding proposition. You probably market them more as a broodmare. Younger fillies, you certainly go down the path of considering the filly and the mare situation. You've got to remember, though, that the person who buys it was the one who will actually make the ultimate decision. So as much as you might categorise them into a race filly session of a catalogue or a broodmare session of a catalogue, ultimately the person who buys it will make the decision, and I think a little bit of common sense comes into play.
I guess you've got to be ready for the fact that if someone is buying it, is there potential to race that?
If there's a filly that comes off the racetrack, you can't. If you sell something in a broodmare session, you can't make a rule that she's not allowed to be a racehorse. The minute that the horse changes hands, even if you happen to be selling a broodmare that's 6 or 7 years old, if the person who buys her wishes to put her back into training, they're fully entitled to do so. It's in the control of the person who owns the horse. Generally, you'll find, though, that the breeding market is the people that are out there trying to buy these race fillies off the track pretty much have got stallions that are ready to cover them, and you'll find that the greater percentage of them will find their way to stud.
Do you offer an opinion of what it might achieve in sales before the sale?
Look, I think what we would endeavour to do is give probably a bit of a ballpark figure is what we would endeavour to do. The thing that's become most interesting, and in fact only yesterday you probably saw that or this morning, in fact in America, a yearling made $8.2 million. Now no bloodstock agent, no auctioneer would have been mad enough to sit back and say, I think this could make about $8 million. You'd just be off your head. So what we find is that it's a lot easier to value horses at 15, 20, 25 or 30,000 because there's not much difference there. When we're getting into trying to put stakes winners on the market, and if you get up into the absolute elites of your Winx and Black Caviars and these sorts of fillies, they're collector's items, and that's where our guests, we tend to be probably, I think, reasonably conservative in the way that we approach things. We're more inclined to sit back and say something could be making $400,000 to $600,000 as a ballpark. To have it go and make $1 million doesn't make us wrong. It just means that two wealthy people locked horns. I think you'll find that most of the time, if we sit back and say that something's worth 15 to 20 or 10 to 15,000, we generally won't be too far out.
So maybe just throw a couple of statements at you guys, and I might sort of get Clint you to start, and then we'll pass it down the line. So 4 to 5 year old mares, there's a good reason for that. So you can have as many foals as possible, and obviously that's where the value is in the mare. First foals, second foals, against 9th, 10th foals. There's a theory out there that the early foals are generally the better ones. What do you think about that?
Oh, it's a topic that you could debate about forever, and for every, I'm trying to think of the terminology, but there's always an exception to the rule. I guess Magic Millions as a company has always focused on young mares and first, second, third foals. That's something we've always done. Maybe that's because the better bred stuff might have gone somewhere else. But nevertheless, it has been a focus of ours on focusing on young mares. The stats do say that some of the best mares are produced at a younger age. But again, the exception to the rule is always there. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Yep. So maybe for you, Tim, mares that have performed really well on the track who have gone on for a longer period of time. Again, some of these unraced mares tend to produce better offspring, and is it that if the mare spends too long on the racetrack, is it detrimental to her in the broodmare barn?
It's a hard one to answer because you've got to have all the statistics. They've always said you don't buy the daughter of a champion, you buy the granddaughter of a champion. And that's proven to be true many times. Some of those good fillies that Bart Cummings trained, the daughters were never great, but Emancipation and those, Denise's Joy, all of those were very good. But there will always be something. It's the same as you said about older mares or younger mares. Right Royal was 21 years old when she foaled Secretariat. It was, most people would say it won't happen. You'll never get a good horse out of an old mare. But that's the exception to prove the rule wrong. So at the end of the day, we probably really, there are no one knows. There's no real facts and figures to say which is right or wrong.
Matt, stakes winners, obviously a gold, I suppose, when it comes to selling broodmares. Is it more important to have stakes winning 2-year-olds with speed and as opposed to, sprinter milers or even distance horses? I mean, we're in an industry now where speed is really important. Is that going to get us more value that, say Crone's a stakes winning 2-year-old, whereas Anjana's and Twitchy Frank are both, 3 and 4-year-old stakes winners?
Yeah, Leigh, that's a very good point. The Australia as a country is in love with precocity and 2-year-old speed, and every country's the same. I imagine when you go to Europe, they're mile plus sort of horses, what they're after. But here, it's all about the golden slipper, the blue diamond, the dream of winning a 2-year-old stakes race. And I believe it does up the value as a mare because people like to breed speed on speed, and that's predominantly what we do in Australia. So I do believe it increases the value of a horse. If you can prove that it was a 2-year-old stakes winner, or it had very good 2-year-old form, I think it's a massive positive going into the marketplace.
And Simon, what about your experiences with, studs buying, broodmares? Is there a bit of a love affair from these studs about trying to buy back their own families, or buy the stallions that might stand at those studs? Is there any sort of emotional attachment these guys get, or is it really just a purely business?
Leigh, I suppose the first thing I'd say is that nothing quite improves a horse like ownership, and if people own a family, they tend to love it. So there's probably some semblance of reality to that, but generally you'll find that the studs are just simply trying to buy as good a racehorse, as good a pedigree, as good a broodmare as they possibly can. I mean, you've asked questions about what's the primary things that people focus on. Look, for me, it's a bit of a jigsaw. The race record is absolutely primary, but then you've got confirmation, you've got the sire, you've got the female family, and as Matt made a comment before, you're talking about a little bit of vibrancy in a family. You don't want to be the only filly in 3 generations that's breeding, because you're going to have to make all the running yourself. It's much better to be buying into a family like, let's say, the Shantha's Choice family, which is Reduced Choices family, where you've got so many high quality fillies coming through. It's an outstanding black type pedigree that's working all the time. So look, whilst a stud would love to be able to buy fillies back in that they're familiar with, it's not quite the same as, say, in the cattle industry, where I think that sort of thing is quite dominant. Here, you would simply go back into a competition, and if you've got an outstanding filly from an outstanding family that's come off of Arrowfield, you can rest assured that every other stud farm in the country would be wanting to try and buy it, because they know how well it's being bred up by Arrowfield itself.
So, guys, what we might do now is, all my questions, we might open it up to the group. I'm sure we've got some questions. Now, I know we all want to know how much Anjana's worth. I know we all want to know how much Twitchy and Crone's worth. And I don't know whether the guys are prepared to stick their neck out and hold up 10 cards or anything like that. But if anyone's got any questions or anything they want to know, maybe just shout out and we'll get the guys to answer the best they can. Dave?
That's $1 million question that I guess that only you guys can work out. I mean, the outcome could be beneficial, it could be detrimental. I'm a little bit lost for words, because it's really up to you what you'd like to do. What I would say, I think, and I hope you all agree, the breeding game is risky, it is costly, and start paying service fees and agistment, I would think it'd take a lot of the fun you've had out of it, to be honest with you. I'd take the premium price to an auction ring and be happy with the prize money earned and the fun you've had, and you can still follow her foals you know. That'd be my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with him completely. It's a different game. Are you racing or are you breeding? And it's two different things. Once you start getting the adjustment bills, the vet's fees, the service fees, you're going to see who your friends are very quickly. And then you get a foal that's compromised and you don't make any money for the first couple of years. I'd just take the money and reinvest, personally.
So Tim, do you want to maybe just talk about, so you're paying adjustment on the mare, you have a foal, how long it takes that foal to get to the race course, if everything works out? And
Yeah.
the next foal, how long is it? Probably only 3 to 4.
Yeah, well, if you breed a mare, just say at this time of the year now, in September, you're going to get the foal next year in August, and then you're going to, before anything happens, you're going to have to start to decide which stallion you're going to send the mare back to again. So you're going to have 2 service fees in the mare, 1 foal on the ground, before you even go to a sale and recoup some of your expenses. So it's pay until then the following year, or luckily if you get to Melbourne or Magic Millions or somewhere like that, and then you'll be able to sell. But nobody knows what that foal's going to be like. And if it's just an ordinary foal and doesn't improve a lot as a yearling, you might be in a lesser sale. And your return's going to be far lesser than you probably preempted to start off with.
Maybe, do you want to talk about how many yearlings you're looking at to maybe just go into premium and the process that you go through with that?
So we've it's massive competition to get into a sale, any sale throughout Australia. Like we've probably got a bit over 2,000 entries just to come to Melbourne Premier. Obviously, we've got to, get that right back to suit our sale to below 800 horses. So there's going to be a lot of people disappointed that they don't make a particular sale, and that could be on the conformation of your horse. It's such a lottery to, breed your mare to a stallion and get a perfectly conformed horse that the public are going to love and want to buy. So it's a very risky game, and it's very challenging because there's a lot of horses trying to aim for the same spot as you.
Who wants to stick their neck out?
I'll answer it.
Throw one at us.
Right, let's start. What do we got? So Crone. Crone's a... Is that right?
No, that was more an answer to his question, not yours. More a general answer, if you don't mind. Yes. You've got 3 fillies that are valuable. Now, as we've discussed, there are variables. There are the female line, the attraction of the sire. There's the looks. But at the end, and then the race record was discussed, and they've all got attractive race records. However, none of us are in control of what the buyers or the market want. We might be able to give you, and I'm sure we'd be very happy to give you a personal, we talk next week, some sort of guide. But for us to sit here now, I think would be very foolish of us to discuss numbers, simply because, as Simon mentioned, there's so many variables. And looks alone, I mentioned to Tim in the car on the way here when he picked me up, a $350,000 mare or filly on paper, if she's a really good sort, can go and make 600. If that makes sense. So there are so many variables, and we'd love to be able to give you an answer.
You must have a minimum ballpark between 300 and 500 on its record on the track.
Look, I could certainly give you the averages, and so could the other guys, of what a similar race performance has sold for. So if we sold 10 stakes winning fillies last year, I think off the top of my head they averaged $280,000. So I could give you that sort of figure. But there are just so many variables out there that it is hard to give an answer. All I would say to you, and I think we would all agree, is that to achieve a premium price, you entrust them to a sales company. The sales company does their best to get the biggest buying bench. The buying bench then compete. They get into a boxing match. I think you might have the analogy you used, and that's where your premium price is achieved. And I wish Peter Buda was here. I've got a great example of a mare that Peter raced himself. I know he's coming a little bit later. He was offered some good money for her prior to the auction. He declined. She made, I think, $800,000 or $900,000 more than he was offered, which what he thought was good money. So all I'd say to you, to achieve what they're worth and hope for a premium, the auction system is the way to go.
So part one is that whatever you do, you're going to blend the physical characteristics to complement the foal by going to a stallion that fits that mare. If the mare is 17 hands, you're not going to send it to a stallion who's 17 hands because you'll end up with a giraffe and a cart horse. So you're trying to correct things. We can get horses on racetracks that perform very well with what we would consider to be maybe less desirable physical features. They might be very offset in their knees. They might be tall, raky, lean things. There might be horses with got no hip and hind quarter. So what you try and do when you go to breed these sorts of mares, you try and complement physical characteristics. You try and complement race records. My great belief is you try and breed like to like. I don't believe in sending a stayer to a sprinter because all you get is a slow sprinter, in my opinion. But you try and breed like to like, and then you're complementing physical, you're complementing race record, and you're complementing pedigree. So you're playing with a pedigree that fits with her as well. So I don't really think there's any great formulas. And the best way that I can answer that is that you get full siblings, and I'll just as a quick one. The mating of Century over a mare called Ruby produced in 1 year. It produced a horse called Rubiton. It was probably the best 10 furlong horse, the best 2,000 metre horse in the world. The next full brother was a horse called Euclase. He won a Group 1, but he couldn't run a yard past 1,200 metres, won a Goodwood in Adelaide. And the third one was a horse called New Century. Again, these are all full brothers, and he couldn't beat time with a stick. So all of the theories that go with it, you'll find that all the time. We've had two brothers of Danehill come down. So we've had Danehill, who was a total freak in what he did down here. His two full brothers were, in reality, useless. So, it's one of those breed the best to the best and hope for the best, but there is no real theories that we've been able to find, and I think that's probably one reason. You might be better off asking the Aga Khan or Khaled Abdullah, who are probably the two best breeders in the world, how to do it, but the rest of us are still flying blind and working for a living.
I think that's the best way you can sum that up, Simon. And this is why, Clint said before, you've got to sell these mares if you want to race. You've either got to decide whether you want to breed or you want to race. And we've all got a love affair with our horses. We love them to death. They've performed amazingly well. We've had an amazing ride. But there's got to come a time when we make a decision on whether we hold or whether we sell. And these guys are giving us that opinion now because there is no exact science, and they're telling you that. We've got to decide as a group and with Mick and Trent and all our trainers when is the right time.
This might help you a little bit on that decision-making process. The actual costs involved, and we've done a study on this, but the actual costs of owning a mare from the point of conception to the time when that foal actually goes through a yearling sale ring, which is actually 2.5 years later in reality, is about $55,000 in cold hard cash out before you even pay a service fee. So if you're looking at a $55,000 commitment to get that foal that you've just gone and sent your mare to, the stallion, she's now pregnant. By the time you think about going through a sale in January, February, March or April, it will be, in reality, two and a half years down the track. You've got $55,000 of various holding costs before you pay a service fee. Obviously, after 12 months, you're going to put another service fee in. So it does become incredibly expensive if you know that you're going to get an outstanding colt with perfect X-rays and a great scope and all these sorts of things. Well, you're laughing, but the chances are you've got 50% chance of getting a filly, you've got 50% chance of getting something with faults and things like that. So there is massive, massive risk, financial risk and exposure in going the long-term version.
Perfect, thanks. Any other last questions for the guys before we hand over to Brendan going?
Just a real quick one. At an auction, is there a reserve? Or just to put your horse up and that's it?
No, you've got every right to put a reserve.
Yeah, we said
No dummy. Yes. Slight change in track, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. What's harder to value? The horse the filly who's been bought for value, she's well put together, she's got a good performance on the track, or the one who kind of tips all that upside down, who was really nicely bred, a little bit plain, didn't quite get it done on the track. What's more difficult for you guys?
The harder one to value there is the one that's got the race record, the one that's performed. Because what you've got nowadays with race fillies is that you might buy a filly out of the yearling sale ring for, let's say, $200,000. If she's no good on the racetrack, her residual now is probably between 10 and 15%. So they're pretty easy to, 200 grand, okay, she might be worth 30. Simple as that. And that's probably the throw at the stumps. Whereas when you've got yourself a stakes winner who's won $300,000 or $400,000, what's she worth? That comes down to what's Darley value her at and Arrowfield value her at and Millburn Creek value her at. So they're the ones that are much harder to value.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out and giving us your opinions. I'm sure it's been valuable. Thank you. Everyone would like to give the guys a round of applause and thanks very much. Cheers.